Thank you, Matthew, for a lovely introduction, and thanks to the Zeit team for putting this amazing conference together. So, I suggest that uh, we get started, and for that, I will just share my screen. Okay, so my presentation is titled The Shiny New World of Jamstack and Serverless, and by the end of it, I hope to convince you how awesome these new technologies really are. As Matthew said, I'm a developer advocate at Pusher, but what he hasn't said is that I am not a front-end developer. And given that I'm speaking at a conference dedicated to front-end teams, I might expand on this a little bit. So my background, developer background, is in mobile. So I've been a mobile developer for many years. And nowadays, I'm more of a generalist, kind of play around with various technologies, um, anything that lets me explain concepts and share cool things with developers easier. But yeah, I've used the Jamstack for several years with my blogs. In fact, this application is actually built with Jamstack and serverless technology. And I'm pretty big fan of the whole movement. So here we are. I am also a bit of a storyteller. And so I felt like I will share a little story with you. So I live in London, the UK, and it's a pretty interesting city. It's not just palaces and royal jewels and the Tower of London and Hyde Park. It's also a worldwide center of commerce and trade. But what is less known is that it's also a pretty big shipping port. This is a photo from the Port of London. It's how we get most goods in and out of the city. And it's the third largest port in the United Kingdom, so pretty big. And actually, shipping and commerce has been something that's been tied to London for a very, very long time. Back when it was founded, 2000 or so years ago, as a Roman port of Londinium, it was a trading post. There was a lot of traffic coming in on the River Thames into the Roman settlement, and the inhabitants were wealthy because they were trading. Over centuries, this has not stopped being the case. The city kept evolving, the city kept growing, but it still kept this maritime heritage. So, back in those days or years, let's say in the Middle Ages, um, if you wanted to be a trader, if you wanted to conduct commerce, you had to do a lot of things yourself. You had to buy a ship, you had to hire a crew, you had to buy the cargo that you wanted to trade. Then you had to sail this crew and ship and cargo yourself as the captain across the ocean to your destination. Maybe on the way you had to fight some pirates. Maybe on the way you had to you were stuck in a storm. It was very dangerous. It was possible that you didn't make it until to your destination. And when you got to your destination, because there was no real-time news, there was no way to get information about what the market is in the other town that you wanted to sell your goods at. Maybe they didn't want it. So you were also at risk at death and financial loss. But people still kept doing commerce, even though they had to do a lot of things themselves, and even though it was associated with substantial risks. Moving on a few centuries, um, there is less risk. If you want to do trading now, there are actually people who will sail ships, who will let you just hire, let's say, a portion of their ship for your cargo, and they will take on the risk of fighting the pirates and weathering the storms and all of that and getting to your destination. And you just buy the cargo, pay them for the transport, and sell the cargo at your destination. I mean, they still don't have internet, they still don't have radio, they still may make a loss, but they don't have to die, which is pretty good. And as the years progressed, more and more people got into this kind of trading and commerce and shipping businesses. So as more and more people did that, they could specialize more. So risk associated with this, with the conduct of this business, was split among more people, and so were the profits. So the more people do it, the more people profit. The more people split the risk. So the industry is actually flourishing, and all associated industries as well. So the good old days. This kept evolving. We got trains. We got better way of conducting trade in general. But the biggest innovation happened in 1968. A gentleman called Malcolm McLean, an American, invented something that would revolutionize the shipping industry and the commerce industry forever. What I'm talking, of course, is the invention of the cargo container. Containers are uniformly sized. All the containers have the same dimensions, and modern ships are built in a way so that they can actually hold a number of containers. So let's say a smallish ship would be able to carry 100 of containers, and you essentially just pay for 1% of their carrying capacity if you want to transport one container. Again, what you put in it doesn't really matter, but it just made the whole shipping process a lot easier. And there's other industries. On this photo, you can actually see a bunch of large cranes. You can see lorries in the front, and stacks and stacks of containers. Everything you get nowadays, whether it's a computer or it's produce in your supermarket, or if it's an iPhone, it comes in a container at some point. Moving on from the 60s towards now, the way we do commerce has actually advanced and been simplified even more. So you don't really need to leave your bedroom if you want to be if you want to trade some goods, if you want to set up a shop. For instance, you can buy stuff online. You can get someone to store the thing that you want to sell or resell in their warehouse. You get to set up a storefront as well. So you have a store that will do take payments, take orders, and then relay that to your warehouse, who will actually do the fulfillment for you. So they will actually pick up the product, package it, and send it to the right person. You just collect the profit, essentially. And that's how this ecosystem has evolved. You, as the person who wants to do trading, actually just needs to make a couple of clicks, and the store is up and running, without there actually being a store, and people who are experts in their field picking those activities up and doing them. Good. But what does this have to do with how we do software development? Turns out it's everything. I mean, even we picked up even the word containers from the shipping and commerce industry. So, but yeah, the progress has been from focusing all of the risk and all of the cost on a single party and towards splitting that among a large number of parties so that it's easier for any individual to get in and do it. And the same has been with software, right? We started off by having to assemble our own computers, to buying our computers, to buying our servers. And then it was renting virtual machines from Amazon in the cloud. And nowadays, it's just about going to Zeit and typing now, and some code that you have in your laptop is magically uploaded and accessible to everyone. So yeah, the progress is very similar. By the way, you should be able to see some text moving below as like a live caption. So this application is actually, this presentation is actually a JAMstack application. I've written the slides in Markdown, and I've used a static site generator to generate the website, and the captions are actually broadcast in real time from my laptop, from where I'm speaking, to anyone who visits this website at its URL. And we do that using pusher channels. I'll show you more about how it's actually made a bit later at the end of the presentation. But before that, let's take a look at some of the definitions of the things that we're talking about. So JAMstack and serverless. I think they are very similar, yet they are distinct. So I will cover both. JAMstack, by definition, consists of JavaScript, the front-end JavaScript that modifies how your site looks and feels from the client's perspective, to the APIs, and the APIs that you essentially can use. So those APIs could actually be things that you've built, that you maintain, or they could be something that you actually just utilize from someone else. And lastly, we've got Markdown, the content source for most modern websites. So instead of having to write HTML by hand, we're actually writing Markdown and transforming this. I am going to focus mostly on the API side of this and a little bit on the JavaScript side. Markdown, it's something that I tend to just kind of get off the shelf and run some processors, whether that's Jekyll or Hugo or Gatsby, doesn't really matter. But yeah, that's where we are. And what's serverless? As I said, serverless could be the APIs that you build. By its the smallest, the narrowest definition, serverless are single functions of code that you deploy to someone who hosts them. That could be Zeit, that could be Amazon or Microsoft Azure, and you essentially just pay for invocations. Because there is less code, there is just the logic code. It's you focus really much more just on your business logic, and you really don't have to worry about any ops stuff, or you don't have to worry about managing servers, that kind of stuff. And one really big component of both of these things, both Jamstack and serverless, is that you get to offload heavy lifting to others who specialize in doing um, things that you may need, but they don't really bring the core value of your app. For instance, that's the company I work for. It's called Pusher, and we make APIs that allow you to make communication features with ease. So whether you're making a delivery application, so someone wants to track a delivery driver on their phone where they are, or you've summoned the car to pick you up, you could do that with us. You open up a WebSocket connection, and without refreshing, you get that information to you. Or it could be live sports scores, live notifications, chat, user presence, live maps. There are very many possible use cases for our real-time technology. So yeah, I actually started thinking about why I'm really such a big fan of these technologies after we had a conversation at work. We had a lunch and learn with some of our engineers, where we discussed a scientific paper called One Step Forward, Two Steps Back, which argues that serverless is actually a negative thing for our industry. The paper is linked, so if you look at the slides later, you can actually read it as well. But I'll just summarize some of the things that we talked about. Obviously, people are going to say that serverless has servers. There's some machinery running. It's not just magic functions in the cloud. It's also more costly than hosting your own small EC2 instance, which costs you a few dollars a month. If you want to host a bunch of serverless functions, it could cost you more. It might cost you more. It's also quite constrained in what kind of hardware you can actually run this on. So if it's a standard old Linux machine, yes, it will run. But if it's a specialized mainframe or specialized scientific computer, it may not run. And then to things like using serverless for machine learning. So machine learning requires usually like a lot of GPU processing. It requires a lot of long-running processes, and serverless, in the sense of the serverless functions, it's not really that optimized for it. Now, one more thing. When I'm talking Jamstack and serverless, I may use the term serverless to cover both of them. But yeah, this presentation focuses on the API side of Jamstack and on the serverless aspect. So yeah, the naysayers, they're saying a bunch of things, and they're all correct. And that's great. They have a point. It doesn't run everywhere. It actually runs on servers, believe it or not, in containers. And it's really missing the point. Now, I have, after this debate, I've kind of been thinking of why I'm such a passionate advocate for these technologies, and I've come up with two reasons really. First one being how it's lowering the barriers to the new generation of computer programmers and software engineers. So we've seen that with every new technology. Like, I did not have to study electrical engineering and I did not have to kind of build my own computer. But people studying 30 or 40 years before me, they had to do that. They actually had to invent their own computers. um, there was nothing to study, they just had to invent it, and a lot fewer people were able to actually get into the industry. And when I was a student, PHP was pretty big, Java was pretty big, um, and then Rails came along, and now we're at serverless. Essentially, it's enabled us to 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 onboard and educate a whole new generation of developers more easily. And to be honest, we need those developers because we don't have enough software engineers as an industry. And there is a couple of really amazing tools out there, so that really make kind of teaching fun and approachable for anyone. First one I want to mention is Glitch. Glitch is a coding environment, a web-based coding environment that lets you immediately see what your output is. You're essentially building a Node.js and HTML website. You have the code on one side, you have the output on one side, and as you make your changes, they're immediately deployed and reflected on the right side. It's all in the browser. You can make your projects public, and you can see other people's projects, um, take their source and turn them into your own project, so you can play around, and it's very approachable. It's actually hiding things like Git. You've got this rewind feature that shows you different variations. Um, you've got, it doesn't really mention npm or node anywhere. It's just like these nice little projects that you can play. And to fork something is actually, they use the term remix. So if you've not seen Glitch, I would encourage you to check it out. They're really cool. They're really fun. If this kind of playful kind of approach of hiding the concepts behind it is not your game, there is also Code Sandbox, which is another web-based environment, but it's kind of more technical, I would say. So it doesn't shy away from concepts like Git and forks and things like that. So it's a more advanced tool, I would say. But they both are very valuable. Anyone can play without having to install any dependencies on their laptop. So it's a great teaching tool. And you can essentially, they're those apps that you build, they're essentially just immediately deployed as serverless JAMstack endpoints. And you can just hit those endpoints, you can share them, you can make a very thin API that also has the source available for anyone. So very cool. I alluded to PHP earlier, and I really like this paraphrase from Pavel, our CTO at Pusher, who essentially said that serverless might be this generation's PHP, because PHP did that to a whole generation of developers. It brought web to the masses, essentially. Before, it was really hard to make a website, and with PHP, it just kind of became a lot easier. And yeah, it's all led us to get people to get started faster and discover the joy of programming and how cool it is to build something, and something that you can show as well. And that's something that I'm really, really passionate about. Second point is this awesome ecosystem that's emerging of tools and services and and companies that are working in this space that are making it easier and easier to build cool things like that. So let's say that you're building your e-commerce site. What can you use out that what don't you have to invent? First off, you don't have to invent logging in and user registration because you can just drop in Auth0. They make a whole kind of user identity backend for you. You just drop it in, you have a little login form, job done. You've got your users. They will host your database securely, and that's all you need. You will need to take payments. You can use Stripe. You don't need to integrate with banks and Visa, MasterCard, Amex, all of those schemes. You just drop in Stripe's API, say, that's how much I want to charge for the item. Boom, job done. You want to deploy version your tool. You wanna add some steps to the deployment pipeline when it's being set up. You can use GitHub Actions to that reacts to things happening to the underlying source code repositories. Obviously, you also want to host it somewhere. I know some people who do that really well. Yeah, Zeit, for instance. There's others, but Zeit are really cool. And lastly, I work for Pusher, so yeah, if you want to add real-time features like these captions, or if you want to add, if it's an e-commerce site, you may want to add some chat. ChatKit is an API that lets you just kind of drop in and provide your users rooms, attachments, message history, that kind of stuff out of the box for one-on-one group chats, whether it's like seller to buyer or it's a support thing going on, anything really. And they are really like, all of these tools are really like, each of them is saving you months of development time and a lot of effort in how to actually scale this, because each of those tools has, each of those companies employ specialists. For instance, we employ distributed systems engineers that manage and scale our WebSocket infrastructure so that you don't have to. Auth0 employs security specialists that make sure that your users' data is secure. So yeah, you get to focus on building what really matters to your website. In our case, this is e-commerce site, so just let them and save money so you can make money faster. Lastly, there are also webhooks, which are arguably one of my favorite features of modern SaaS applications. They are essentially the glue that lets you react to all the things that are happening. So if you get a new payment, Stripe can send you a webhook to your endpoint, which can be a serverless endpoint, again, just a function somewhere that takes this payment, maybe sends a message over to your warehouse, or maybe it sends a message to your to someone using your chat application, say, hey, payment has been successful. Whatever it is, webhooks are a way for SaaS applications to kind of connect back into your application. So so you get to glue all of these events together into this kind of chain of interconnected tools. So yeah, to summarize, these new technologies of JAMstack and Serverless, they are great at how they are empowering new generations of developers, whether that's actually people coming from universities or if it's people coming from other industries into development, and they also let you to focus on shipping value by relying on what's already out there. Serverless and JAMstack and associated technologies, they're progress. They're a step forward. They're not perfect. They're not for everything. But I would argue they are really inevitable. So, okay. So we've covered the basis of my talk. Now let's take a brief look at how the captions are made. So the players in the whole application are Google Cloud. They have a speech-to-text service. On my laptop, as I'm recording this, I'm actually capturing the audio, sending it to Google Cloud, which is returning to me a stream of text events telling me like how is the text changing. As I get those text events back, I am broadcasting them using pusher channels. On the website itself, I'm actually subscribing to one of those pusher channels as I'm connected. There's actually opening a WebSocket to our service so that anyone who runs a website, who visits this website, will also open a WebSocket. So if I'm currently broadcasting those speech-to-text events, anyone who visits this website would actually see the same captions in the same time, even if they're not actually hearing me here live. The presentation is made with Reveal Hugo, which is a theme for the Hugo static site generator. It's made by Josh Jalak. Thanks, Josh. It's a cool tool. It basically makes a Reveal.js presentation for Hugo. So you write Markdown, your slides are in Markdown, and it generates a Reveal.js site. And obviously, Zeit now for deploying and hosting this. So yeah, I'll show you the code very briefly. So Google Cloud speech to text. You will need a Google account if you're playing around with this. You will need a Google account, but essentially it's just an API. It comes with SDKs for Node, Python, I think, and you can just use that. And yeah, as you configure that, it's essentially just like hitting that API using the SDK, and that's all. They do all the magic. They give you all the data back in the format that you can then process. Pusher channels. This is a look of the dashboard. So right now I have 2 people connected. I think both of them are me. I'm also sending those messages. So messages are the number of things I get from Google speech to text that I'm sending back through pusher channels. And I'll show you the code just now. So for to record my voice and send it to Google, I took a sample of their official samples, and essentially what it does is opens a recording stream from your microphone. It works on Windows and Mac. I've tried. It's pretty cool. As you run this function start stream, it will then get constant callbacks from Google. essentially all that I've done is set up channels to trigger the messages, to send the messages that I get from Google as they are transcribed um, to my channel. So I'm configuring with my credentials, which I will rotate after this presentation. And let me find the code for this. Okay. Yeah, so we got this speech callback function, which gets triggered on every bit of data that I get. So data comes into two forms. One is final, so because when you are actually speaking, it's already trying to figure out what the words are. But only when you stop, it will actually kind of finalize what that line was. You can actually see it down below on in this output. The red one is actually the actively modified text, and the green ones are the ones that are final. So I'm triggering is sending messages over WebSockets channel to channels to broadcast over WebSockets. So this is a final event, and this is my text, and this is my whip event with, again, the text. And again, I just took most of the code, and it just really worked. And my presentation itself, I have a bit of captioning class, which I just need to find. Public, no, it's layouts, partials, yeah. So my transcription. So this gets added to all of the slides. Again, I'm just importing the pusher script, and I'll show you the transcription JS file. Essentially, we're grabbing that div, instantiating pusher, and subscribing to it. This is essentially subscribing to the transcription channel, and if I get a whip transcription, so the one that's not final, the one that's rendered red in the previous rendering, I will put it into the first line. If it's actually, no, I will put it in the second line. If it's a final one, I'll put it on the first line, so the final one is like static on top. So at the end, you get something like this. And I am at this slide. How novel is that? Not at all. Google Slides has this. PowerPoint has this. It's an accessibility feature, but it was very cool to make, and very cool to be able to show a JAMstack application with some serverless magic for a JAMstack conference. So yeah, what's the future of serverless? What's the future of development? I don't know. I really don't know. But I do know that Walmart have announced that they're planning to add a delivery option to the things that they're delivering, so that you can actually get Walmart's delivery driver to enter your home while you're not there and fill your fridge with the things that you're purchasing, which I honestly don't know what the development analogy is, but it's a good food for thought. That's it. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. My name is Zan. You can find me on Twitter. You can email me, or you can check us out at Pusher or pusher.com. Thank you very much again to Zayt for this opportunity. And yeah, I'll share the slides. I'll tweet the slides so you can check them out as well. All the repos are public, so yeah, it's all available for you. Thank you very much.